Testing, testing. Types of real estate licenses in Missouri. Every company has one, the broker, who is the business entity itself. Types of real estate license. Active, broker, salesperson, broker salesperson, broker officer, broker partner, broker associate. Number 2, inactive, broker, salesperson, inactive broker salesperson? I'm not sure about that. Temporary, or a non-resident. Number 1, active. Broker, one who is licensed to perform real estate activities for another and collect a commission. All real estate companies must have just one broker who holds all the licenses for the company. This includes the main office as well as any branch offices. This broker is known as the broker or the broker of record. Responsible for the following. Responsible for the following. Direct supervision of all licensees, escrow accounts, management of the real estate company. Paying of all fees and commissions received to other licensed brokers and to salespeople licensed to him or her. All listings, buyer's agent contracts, and property management contracts are made in the name of the broker. A listing agreement may be assigned, sold, or otherwise transferred to another broker without the express written consent of all parties to the original listing agreement. A listing agreement may not be assigned, sold, or otherwise transferred to another broker without the express written consent of all parties to the original listing agreement. Next, the broker is responsible for brokers not actively engaged in real estate may not hold other licenses. Also, every broker shall maintain his or her license and the licenses of all associates in the regular place of business or branch office. And so the license will be in the office. The licenses shall be displayed to any member of the public on request. So it used to be you had to show them, but now it has to be at the office and the main office and upon request. Renews broker's license June 30th of every 2 years, on the even year. Salesperson. Number 2, salesperson. These are types of licenses. Salesperson, one who is licensed and works for a broker, can act only with guidance and direct supervision from his broker, which would be called the broker. The salesperson cannot manage other licensees or run their own business independently. The salesperson cannot pay fees or receive fees from anyone except his or her own broker, the broker. The salesperson renews their license September 30th every 2 years on even years. Broker salesperson. Number 3, broker salesperson. One who has passed the broker's exam but chooses to operate as a salesperson under another broker. This would be called, the broker salesperson surrenders broker's license to MREC and receives broker salesperson's license. The broker salesperson may act as a branch or sales manager the broker salesperson cannot have a salesperson license under him or her, does not hold, the broker salesperson cannot have a salesperson licensed under him or her, does not hold the licenses of people working under him or her, not legally responsible for others, but a broker salesperson may supervise. A broker salesperson does not hold the licenses of people working under him or her and is not legally responsible for others, but a broker salesperson may supervise. As a broker salesperson, I manage the branch office, hire and fire associates, but I do not hold the licenses. The broker does that. Number 4, types of licenses. Another type of license is broker officer, broker partner, broker associate. These are ones I've been confused about before. Broker officer, broker partner, broker associate is a licensee who has passed the broker's exam and is working as an owner, a partner, and associate of a real estate company which is in a corporation, partnership, or association. In parentheses, they have LLC. In the case where the real estate company is a corporation, partnership, or association, then the company itself must have a broker's license. The company must have a broker's license. The commission requires the name, residence, and business addresses of each partner, associate, or officer. The commission requires name, residence, and business address of each partner, associate, or officer, licensed or unlicensed, and that the entity is currently in good standing with the Secretary of State. The commission must be notified within 10 days of any changes of information on file. Corporations must be registered with the Secretary of State and the Missouri Real Estate Commission. Before a broker license will be issued to a partnership, association, or corporation, each partner in a partnership or each associate in an association or each officer in a corporation who actively participate in the supervision of the real estate brokerage business of the firm, as defined in the license law, shall hold the appropriate broker license, and each broker salesperson or salesperson associated with the firm shall hold the appropriate license. An individual that maintains a salesperson license may also hold an officer title within a corporation. They must be in good standing with the Secretary of State. DBA is doing business as, using name other than your own. MREC, these are notes I took, must be notified of moves or changes within 10 days, must be registered with the SOS, I don't know what that is. A salesperson can be an officer, but cannot be involved in management of the business. Sales manager can be, I don't know if that sounds right. Must be approved. A salesperson licensee may be a corporate officer, but may not supervise any real estate activities or be involved in management. May not supervise any real estate activities or be involved in management. Professional corporation. Professional corporation, number 5. Only salespersons and broker salespersons who are licensed to render the services mentioned in Section 339 may be licensed as a professional corporation. The corporate name must be approved by the Commission. The license must be issued in the name of the salesperson or broker salesperson to whom the license is issued. No fictitious names will be accepted. All stock or shares in a professional corporation must be held by the salesperson or the broker salesperson to whom the professional corporation's license is issued. Okay, next category, inactive licenses, inoperative, or inactive or inoperative license. MREC holds the license. The broker or salesperson. You must apply to MREC and pay $50 to place your license inactive. $50 to pay place license inactive. MREC will hold your license. Licensee may not transact business nor accept referral fees while inactive. Must renew license every 2 years and pay renewal fees, even if your license is inactive. To reactivate the license, you must attend the appropriate course of study and apply for an active license within 6 months of course completion. You are not required to take the exam to reactivate an inactive license. 60-hour salesperson's course or 48 hours broker's course. Must apply, pay $50 to place the license inactive, cannot transact business. You must renew the license every 2 years and pay renewal fees. To reactivate, you have to take 60-hour salesperson course or 48-hour broker's course. Inactive licenses do not have to take continuing education. They cannot collect commission. But you still have to renew every 2 years on even years. To activate, take the course, pay a fee, no test. Okay. You have to take the test, the course, to reactivate, but you don't have to take the test. Category 3, temporary license, issued upon the death or incapacity of a sole propriety broker to any approved by the MRC, anyone approved by the MREC. MREC issues this temporary license for the length of time the MREC feels is necessary to complete the pending transaction. This is not done in a corporation. The temporary license is not done in a corporation, partnership, or association since the broker does not die. Sole business is to complete the transaction in progress. Sole purpose is to complete the transaction in progress. Sales contract. Listing dies with the broker. This person does not have to pass an exam or pay a fee. No license is required. Issued without examination or fee to anyone the MREC wishes to terminate the existing transaction. If I am sick or die or someone needs to shut down the business, no exam or no fee, like a secretary knows what's going on. Number 4, non-resident license. Non-resident licensed in another state, 12 of the 18 months immediately preceding application for the license examination doesn't read right. Non-resident licensed in another state, 12 of the 18 months immediately preceding application for the license examination with MREC approval may sit for the exam one time only without attending pre-license hours. Must pass both portions or attend school and take the exam as a new applicant. Must pass both portions or attend school and take the exam as a new applicant. Non-residents. Non-residents may submit exam scores from another state for the national requirement if applied within 6 months of the licensure in another state and pass state exam only. However, applicant must still meet educational requirements. Non-residents may obtain a license without exam if such reciprocity is extended to Missouri residents. Every licensed non-resident shall be associated with a licensed Missouri broker. Any individual broker not residing in the state and not holding a valid real estate broker's license in the state of domicile must place the license in this state on inactive status during the period of absence from this state or request the license be placed with a Missouri licensed broker. Every licensed non-resident shall be associated with a licensed Missouri broker. Every licensed non-resident. Any individual broker not residing in this state and not holding a valid real estate broker's license in the state of domicile must place the license in this state on inactive status during the period of absence from this state or request the license be placed with a Missouri licensed broker. Any applicant for a broker's license must first have passed the salesperson examination in Missouri. Non-resident may pay a fee equal to the fee a Missouri resident would pay in the non-resident state for a similar license. Must pay a fee equal to the fee a Missouri resident would pay in the non-resident state for a similar license. Non-resident license requires that the MREC is provided with a certificate from the state attesting that the licensee is in good standing and must pass the exam. Quiz. A non-resident applying for a Missouri license would pay as a license fee. A non-resident. Must pay a fee equal to the fee a Missouri resident would pay in a non-resident state for a similar license. Dole is considering creating a real estate company as a corporation. If he does so, which license would be required of the corporation itself? A broker's license. Dole is considering creating a real estate company as a corporation. If he does so, which license would be required of the corporation itself? A broker's license. Which is true when a corporation receives a broker's license? All corporate officers involved in a brokerage business must have active broker officer licenses or a salesperson's license, but the salesperson cannot participate in the supervision of the office. A broker with one salesperson is retiring and moving to Florida to run a grocery store. He wants the salesperson to continue to have her job. Can he still do this? No, because he would not be in control of the salesperson's actions. 5. A person owned her own company specializing in negotiating sales for buyers and sellers. She had incorporated her business but does not get listings or sell property. Does she need a real estate license to do so? Yes, she would need a broker's officer's license, and her corporation would need a broker's license. And her own company specialized in negotiating sales and buyers for buyers and sellers. She had incorporated her business, but does not get listings or sell property. Does she need a real estate license? Yes, she would need a broker officer's license, and her corporation would need a broker's license. 6. A corporation was entering the real estate business. It must be registered with the MREC. A broker dies and his company is placed in receivership. The MREC can appoint a temporary broker to finish the existing sales contract. The MREC can appoint a legal temporary license, in which case, upon the death of the broker, to terminate all listing agreements and coordinate the closing of pending contracts between sellers and buyers. A broker opened a branch office. Who would have authority to manage the office? The broker. Number 11. Mr. Baird was sole proprietor of a commercial real estate company. He died. His son, Jim Baird, did not have a real estate license, but he was named executor of the estate. Jim Baird can be appointed to finish only the business in process. Number 12. Which of the following would require a real estate license? A person who negotiates in options for others. Which of the following would require a real estate license? An attorney transferring property for a client. No, attorneys don't need license. The auctioneer employed by the owner. No. A property manager employed by a broker to show only apartments. No. A person who negotiates in options for others. A broker opened a branch office. Which of the following could not manage that office? A salesperson working for a duly licensed broker. Next section, brokerage relationship, agency and non-agency. To collect a commission for real estate, the salesperson and the broker must have a brokerage relationship with the seller, landlord, buyer, or tenant. The 5 types of brokerage relationship agreements are brokerage service listing agreement, buyer's agency agreement, transaction brokerage agreement, property management agreement, or dual agency agreement. Again, 5 types of brokerage relationship agreements are brokerage service listing agreement, buyer's agency agreement, transaction brokerage agreement, property management agreement, or dual agency agreement. Definition. Adverse material fact. A fact related to the physical condition of the property, not reasonably ascertainable or known to a party, which negatively affects the value. Adverse material facts may include matters pertaining to A. Environmental hazards affecting the property. B. Physical condition of the property which adversely affects the value of the property. C. Material defects in the property. D. Material defects in the title of the property. E. Material limitation of the party's ability to perform under the terms of the contract. Adverse material, a fact related to the physical condition of the property, not reasonably ascertainable or known to a party, which negatively affects the value. Adverse material facts may include matters pertaining to environmental hazards, physical condition, material defects in the property, material defects in the title of the property, or material limitation of the party's ability to perform under the terms of the contract. Affiliate licensee. Any broker or salesperson who works under the supervision of a designated broker. Affiliate licensee. Affiliate licensee, any broker or salesperson who works under the supervision of a designated broker. Agent, a person or entity acting pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 339. Agent, a person or entity acting pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 339. Broker disclosure form. The current form prescribed by the Commission for presentation to a seller, landlord, buyer, or tenant who has not entered into a written agreement for brokerage services. The Missouri Broker Disclosure Form must be provided by a licensee to a consumer. That's the form in the front of my book. Number 1, the Broker Disclosure Form should be provided by a licensee to the consumer, number 1, at the earliest practicable opportunity during or following the first substantial contact by the designated broker or the affiliated licensees with a seller, landlord, buyer, or tenant who has not entered into a written agreement for services as described in the license law. This disclosure should be made before the buyer, seller, landlord, or tenant gives the licensee personal or financial information. Number 2, broker disclosure form should be provided to the consumer. Number 2, the licensee shall provide that person with a written copy of the current broker disclosure form which has been prescribed by a commission. Broker disclosure form. Number 3, when a seller, landlord, buyer, or tenant has already entered into a written agreement for services with a designated broker, no other licensee with the same company shall be required to make the disclosures required by the license law. Broker disclosure forms must be provided by a licensee to a consumer. Number 4, disclosures made in accordance with the license law shall be sufficient as a matter of law to disclose broker relationships to the public. The form does not require the consumer's signature. Brokerage relationship. The relationship created between a designated broker, the broker's affiliated licensees, and a client relating to the performance of services of a broker. Brokerage relationship. The relationship created between a designated broker, the broker's affiliated licensees, and a client relating to the performance of services of a broker. If a designated broker makes an appointment of an affiliated licensee or affiliated licensee, designated agent, pursuant to Chapter 339, such brokerage relationships are created between the appointed licensee or licensee, designated agent, and the client. A designated agent is a licensee named by a designated broker as a limited agent of a client as provided for in the license law. Nothing in this subdivision shall alleviate the designated broker from duties of supervision of the appointed licensee or licensees, or B, alter the designated broker's underlying contractual agreement with the client, or C, A broker can designate one agent in the company to represent a seller or a landlord and another agent in the company to represent the buyer or tenant. In this situation, the company would be representing both the seller, landlord, and the buyer, tenant. Client. A seller, landlord, buyer, or tenant who has entered into a brokerage relationship with a licensee. A seller, landlord, buyer, or tenant who has entered into a brokerage relationship with a licensee. Example, listing, fire agency, or property management agreement. A client is someone a real estate agent works for and has a written agreement with, such as a seller, buyer, landlord, or tenant. Compensation. A broker can collect a commission from a seller, landlord, and a buyer, tenant, as long as the sources of payment are disclosed to all parties involved in the transaction. Payment of fees does not establish an agency or non-agency relationship. That relationship is established by the written agreement between the parties. Commission. The Missouri Real Estate Commission. Confidential information. Confidential information is information obtained by the licensee from the client and designated as confidential by the client. Information made confidential by sections of the statute see below, or any other statute or regulation, or written instructions from the client, unless the information is made public or becomes public by the words or conduct of the client to whom the information pertains, or by a source other than the licensee. Example, your client's personal secrets, like divorce, transfer, lost job, etc., remain secret unless you have written permission to disclose this. Anything you know about the property must be disclosed. Customer. An actual or potential seller, landlord, buyer, or tenant in a real estate transaction in which a licensee is involved, but who has not entered into a brokerage relationship with a licensee. And that would take some kind of a written agreement. Someone a licensee may be working with, but not for. In other words, a consumer who has not signed a written agency agreement. That customer or consumer may later decide to hire the licensee and become a client. Designated broker. Any individual licensed as a broker who is operating pursuant to the definition of real estate broker, or any individual licensed as a broker who is appointed by a partnership, association, limited liability corporation, or corporation engaged in real estate brokerage business to be responsible for the acts of the partnership, association, limited liability corporation, or corporation. Every real estate partnership, association, or limited liability corporation or corporation shall appoint a designated broker. This appointment does not absolve any other officers, partners, or associates from responsibility for the actions of licensees in their company. The designated broker is responsible for communication with the MREC. Do not confuse this appointment with a designated agent appointed by the designated broker. Designated broker. Any individual licensed as a broker who is operating pursuant to the definition of real estate broker, or any individual licensed as a broker who is appointed by the partnership, etc., engaged in real estate brokerage business to be responsible for the acts of the partnership, association, limited liability corporation, or corporation. Do not confuse this appointment, designated broker, with a designated agent appointed by a designated broker. Dual agency, a form of agency which may result when an agent licensee or someone affiliated with the agent licensee represents another party to the same transaction. Dual agent, a limited agent who, with the written consent of all parties to a contemplated real estate transaction, has entered into an agency brokerage relationship and not a transaction brokerage relationship, with and therefore represents both the seller and the buyer, or both the landlord and tenant. A dual agent is a licensee who is representing both parties to the same transaction and whose company has a written agency agreement with both parties. For example, a listing agreement with a seller and a buyer agency agreement with the buyer, and then because of the relationship with both clients, has them sign a dual agency agreement. This is illegal unless all parties to the transactions are informed of the dual agency and give their consent. Licensee, a real estate broker or salesperson as defined in the license law. Limited agent, a licensee whose duties and obligations to a client are those set forth in license law. Ministerial acts, those acts that a licensee may perform for a person or entity that are informative in nature and do not rise to the level which requires the creation of a brokerage relationship. Examples of these acts include, but are not limited to, A, responding to telephone inquiries by consumers as to the availability and pricing of brokerage services. B, responding to telephone inquiries from a person concerning the price or location of property. C, attending an open house and responding to questions about the property from a consumer. D, setting an appointment to view property. E, responding to questions of consumers walking into a licensee's office concerning brokerage services offered on particular property. F, accompanying an appraiser or inspector, contractor, or similar third party on a visit to a property. G, describing a property or the property's condition in response to a person's inquiry. H, showing a customer through a property being sold by an owner on his or her own behalf. Showing a customer through a property being sold by an owner on his own behalf. I, referral to another broker or service provider. Single agent, a licensee who has entered into a brokerage relationship with and therefore represents only one party in a real estate transaction. A single agent may be one of the following. A buyer's agent, which shall mean a licensee who represents the buyer in a real estate transaction. B, a seller's agent, which shall mean licensee who represents the seller in a real estate transaction. C, landlord's agent, which shall mean a licensee who represents a landlord in a leasing transaction. D, tenant's agent, which shall mean a licensee who represents the tenant in a leasing transaction. Sub-agent. A designated broker, together with the broker's affiliated licensee, engaged by another designated broker, together with the broker's affiliated licensees, engaged by a designated broker, together with the broker's appointed affiliated licensees, to act as a limited agent for a client. A sub-agent owes the same obligations and responsibilities to the client pursuant to the license law as does the client's designated broker. Example, you work for ABC Real Estate Company and you are working with a buyer who chooses not to be represented. You want to show a listing advertised by XYZ Real Estate Company and call to make an appointment to show it to your buyer, the customer, who does not want to buy through agency. When you call, you inform the licensee from XYZ that you will be acting as a sub-agent of the seller. When you call, you inform the licensee that you will be acting as a sub-agent of the seller. This means that you are an agent of the seller and not the buyer. Transaction broker. Any licensee who is working with one or both parties to a transaction but is not representing either. The licensee has not entered into an agency agreement with either party and therefore cannot advocate for one party over another party or advise them as to what might be in their best interest. A transaction broker may assist the parties to a transaction without an agency or fiduciary relationship to either party and is therefore neutral, serving neither as an advocate or advisor for either party to a transaction. The transaction broker may assist one or more parties to a transaction and who has not entered into a specific written agency agreement to represent one or more of the parties. A transaction broker may assist another party to the same transaction either solely or through licensee affiliates. Such licensee shall be deemed to be a transaction broker and not a dual agent, provided that notice of assumption of transaction broker status is provided to the buyer and seller immediately upon such default to transaction broker status, to be confirmed in writing prior to execution of the contract. Still under transaction broker. Number 1, a licensee's general duties and obligation arising from the limited agency relationship shall be disclosed in writing to the seller and the buyer or to the landlord and the tenant pursuant to sections in the statute. Alternatively, when engaged in any of the activities enumerated in these sections, a licensee may act as an agent in any transaction in accordance with a written agreement as described in sections of the statute. 2. A licensee shall be considered a transaction broker unless the designated broker enters into a written seller's agent or landlord's agent agreement with the party or parties to be represented pursuant to sections in the statute. Licensee will be a transaction broker unless 2. The designated broker enters into a sub-agency agreement with another designated broker pursuant to sections in the statute. The licensee will be a transaction broker unless the designated broker enters into a written buyer's agent or tenant's agent agreement with the party or parties to be represented pursuant to sections of the statute. A licensee will be considered a transaction broker unless the designated broker enters into a written agency agreement pursuant to sections of the statute. A licensee shall be considered a transaction broker unless the designated broker and the affiliated licensees are performing ministerial acts. A licensee shall be considered a transaction broker unless the designated broker and the affiliated licensees are performing ministerial acts, or unless the designated broker enters into a written dual agency agreement with the parties pursuant to sections of the statute, or unless the designated broker is acting in a manner described in sections of the statutes without proper notice of assumption of transaction broker status, or unless the licensee is making a listing presentation, which may include pricing and marketing advice about a potential future transaction to a customer in anticipation of entering into a signed agency brokerage service agreement as a direct result of the presentation. Under transaction broker, number 3, the statutes do not obligate any buyer or tenant to pay compensation to a designated broker unless the buyer or tenant has entered into a written agreement with the designated broker specifying the compensation terms in accordance with the statute. Number 4, a licensee may work with a single party in separate transactions pursuant to different relationships, including but not limited to selling one property as a transaction broker, or a seller's agent working with that seller in buying another property as a buyer's agent, as a sub-agent, or as a transaction broker, if the licensee complies with sections in the statute in establishing the relationships for each transaction. Cliff. At what point must a listing broker licensee first disclose to a buyer the broker's licensee's broker's relationship with the seller? A, before the buyer gives the broker licensee personal or financial information. Number 2, a salesperson pre-qualified a buyer and took financial and personal information at that time. The salesperson then showed a buyer several homes. Just prior to showing the homes, the salesperson gave the buyer a copy of the Missouri Broker Disclosure Form. Did the salesperson violate the license law? Yes, the salesperson should have given the buyer the Missouri Broker Disclosure Form prior to taking any personal or financial information. Number 3, Sam Jones with ABC Real Estate Company listed a property for sale. Rita Smith with the same company obtained a buyer agency agreement from a buyer. The buyer decided the property he wanted to buy was Sam Jones' listing. Which of the following would be true? B, ABC Real Estate Company would be representing both buyer and seller. Four, a disclosure to the buyer from a sub-agent working as a seller's agent must include all the following except D, a statement that the seller is facing bankruptcy. That would be a personal thing. So that would be the right answer, but it's the one that's wrong. 5, which of the following would be true regarding transaction brokerage? B, the broker is representing neither party. It can facilitate the transaction. 6, broker Blunt with Blunt Real Estate Company has a buyer's agency agreement with a buyer. He finds that broker Smith with Smith Real Estate Company has a listing his buyer wants to buy. The buyer makes an offer, and broker Blunt gives it to Smith, who represents it to his seller. The seller accepts the offer without any changes. The buyer pays Blunt $1,000 according to their agency agreement, and Smith splits his commission with blunt. Which of the following would be true? This situation would be legal as long as the sources of payment are disclosed to all parties involved in the transaction. The buyer pays blunt, broker blunt, according to their agency agreement. And Smith broker Smith splits his commission with blunt, broker blunt. Which of the following would be true? This situation would be legal as long as the sources of payment are disclosed to all parties involved in the transaction. Okay. Well, the reason they could do that is because they were both assuming, it sounds like they were both the broker. Real estate brokerage, the law of agency. An agent is a person who is empowered by contract to represent the interests of someone called a principal. If I represent you, you are called the principal, and I am called the agent. The relationship between the two is called an agency relationship, and the agent is called a fiduciary. Basically, like an attorney, his relationship with clients. Fiduciary, having to do with money. Typically, a listing broker is usually considered to be a fiduciary agent of the seller. This type of relationship is called a fiduciary relationship, one of the utmost trust. Not necessarily money, but the utmost trust. When one person is empowered by another to represent him in any type transaction, it is called an agency relationship. Money is not the issue, but rather the relationship of the parties. So I said that wrong a minute ago. Money is not the issue, but rather the relationship of the parties, utmost trust. The three ways in which an agency relationship is created. Written, through a signed agreement, or expressed through a verbal agreement between the parties. Number two, ostensible implied agency, through the words and conduct of the parties, implied through behavior. Demonstrate acts by conduct. Number three ways in which an agency relationship is created. Ratification, the adoption or confirmation of an act already performed on behalf of a person without prior authorization. When an agent works for a principal, that person is a client. When an agent works with a person, that individual is a customer. An agent should know who he represents. According to the law of agency, a fiduciary relationship exists between the listing salesperson, selling salesperson, the brokers involved, and the seller. The relationship of the utmost trust. Types of agents. General agent handles multiple transactions of property management. Property management can sign certain contracts, rental agreements, and make some decisions for the client, who would be the property owner. Decisions he or she has given authority to make. Universal agent handles all delegated business of principal. Has power of attorney called attorney in fact. Must be written. Special agent handles one specific transaction for the principal, a listing agreement, cannot sign contracts on his or her behalf or make decisions for the principal. This can be a trick on a test sometimes, he said. You've listed 5 houses for a client. Is this a general agent? No, you're still a special agent. General agent is only a property manager. A general agent is only a property manager. Special agent is us. I own part of this listing, so it is called an agency with an interest. While a real estate agent might not work for the KGB, he is still a special agent. Agency coupled with an interest. When the real estate licensee is a partner in the ownership of the property, this type of agency does not allow for cancellation of listings as other types do. What a great agent I am, since I know who I represent, and all parties know I put my client first. A good agent in this situation chooses who he wishes to represent, communicates the decision to all parties, conducts business in a manner that is consistent with the choices made and communicated. What does an agent owe his/her principal? Care, taking due care, the utmost, of that which is entrusted to the agent, including writing a contract in such a manner so that the interests of the principal are protected. Obedience, lawful instructions of the principal are followed. Accounting, handling money, including escrows, with care and closing statement figures. Loyalty, putting the principal first. Confidentiality, avoidance of dual agency unless agreed to by all parties. Notice, sometimes called disclosure, of material facts disclosed as well as relationships, important business facts for the principal to make decisions upon. It's pretty basic. To represent a client, you need to do pro-Allen. So that's the initials for obedience, accounting, due care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, and notice. Frank, help me with this quiz. Agency most nearly means A, one who is the source of another's authority. B, one who represents and acts for another. C, one who has conferred authority to another. D, one who has been paid a commission by another. One who is the source of another's authority, one who represents and acts for another. 2, obedience of the agent to the principal means A, the agent may disobey those instructions in good faith if the agent feels necessary. No. The agent must follow all instructions of the seller even if they violate the law. No. The agent must follow those instructions regardless of personal feelings about them. The agent must follow all those instructions regardless of the consequences. The agent must follow those instructions regardless of personal feelings about them, because obedience says lawful instructions of the principal are followed. 3, a broker listed 3 different properties for the same seller. What type of agency has been created? General, special, dual, or universal? It's still special, isn't it? A general agent handles multiple transactions of property management. What has to do with property management? A special agent handles one specific transaction for the principal, a listing agreement. Dual agency, we know what that is. Universal agent handles all delegated business of the principal, has power of attorney. So a broker listed 3 different properties for the same seller, it's still special agent.
I think so.
4, the appointment of an agency's relationship is best accomplished via a written contract, without a contract, always by an oral agreement, through implication or ratification, via a written contract. Frank? And there is such a thing as puffing. We came across that the other day. It means the agent's subjective opinion.
Oh.
5, when a home is listed, what is the minimum which can be created? The minimum which can be created. A, agency coupled with an interest. B, general agency. C, special agency. D, universal agency. Well, agency coupled with an interest when the real estate licensee is a partner in the ownership of property, of that property. This type of agency does not allow for cancellation of listing. When a home is listed, the minimum which can be created is special agency. 6, the broker has the obligation to do whatever the broker believes to be in the best interest of the owner. B, do whatever the owner has instructed him to do legally. The broker is obligated to C, discriminate at the owner's instructions. D, accept offers in the name of the owner. Do whatever the owner has instructed him to do legally. Do whatever the broker believes to be in the best interest of the owner. Do whatever the owner has instructed him to do legally. Accept offers in the name of the owner? Which one is this going to be?
Okay, read that again.
The broker has the obligation to do whatever the broker believes to be in the best interest of the owner. No. The broker has the obligation to do whatever the owner has instructed him to do legally. The broker has the obligation to discriminate at the owner's instructions. No. The broker has the obligation to accept offers in the name of the owner.
No.
No?
No.
Why?
Read the question again.
The broker has the obligation to.
They does not have the obligation to accept an offer. He has to present the offer to the owner.
Oh, okay. So it's either do whatever the broker believes to be in the best interest of the owner, or do whatever the owner has instructed him to do legally. Well, looking back at the page here,
I'm going to say, hey, do what the owner has instructed him to do legally.
A latent defect is not easily noticed, but if you know, it must be disclosed. Disclose latent and material defects. List the three things an agent owes third-party customers. I owe the third party tax. Do you think they'll notice? H, honesty. A, accuracy in numbers. C, the disclosure of defects. Blank is an exaggeration or superlative comment. While this can be unethical, it is legal. Subjective opinion is puffing. 2. Blank, on the other hand, is not legal and is defined as deception intended to cause a person to give up property or a lawful right. An intentional misrepresentation. What would you say that is? Fraud?
And illegal representation?
Either fraud or ratification.
It's not ratification.
Over here they said ratification, the adoption or confirmation of an act already performed on behalf of a person without prior authorization. He said that was illegal.
You said that was illegal?
But I wrote illegal, but that isn't right, is it?
Oh, man, I don't know.
Blank, on the other hand, is not legal and is defined as deception intended to cause a person to give up property or a lawful right. Intentional misrepresentation. Is that fraud? I don't know. Must disclose all known defects, including structural defects, to buyer before an offer is written. Blank is something that is known to the seller, but not to the purchaser, and not readily discoverable by inspection. If the seller or the broker is aware of such a defect, he or she must disclose this to the buyer. Failure to disclose latent defects is misrepresentation, and the buyer may rescind the contract. Well, is that latent defect?
Yeah, I think so. What other options do you have?
Well, it's not an option. It's to fill in the blank.
Oh, wow. Don't you have that in your book?
Well, I'm looking at it, but material facts, latent defects. Well, if you read it, and then it has the answer in the question. Blank is something that is known to the seller, but not to the purchaser. Well, a latent defect, though.
A latent defect isn't necessarily known by the seller either.
Right. So that's why I'm thinking that that's not the right answer.
And I didn't do that.
I don't know. Because the way he read it to us, he said latent defect, not easily noticed, but if you know, it must be disclosed. A material fact, like termites, crack in the heat exchange, things that need to be fixed. So maybe it's material fact is something that is known to the seller but not to the purchaser and not really discovered by inspection. If the seller or the broker is aware of such a defect, okay, it's either a material defect material fact or latent defect. Oh, material defects such as leaking basement, leaking roofs, and termites must be disclosed regardless of whom the agent represents. As is not acceptable. Can a broker represent both parties in a transaction? Yes, as long as all parties agree and a dual agency agreement has been signed by all. Is that correct?
Say that again.
Can a broker represent both parties in a transaction? Yes, as long as all parties agree and a dual agency agreement has been signed by all.
Correct.
Undisclosed dual agency violates the agent's duty of loyalty. Compensation. What is required to collect a commission? I'm working on my commission by having a real estate license, being employed, and being the procuring clause. Procuring clause means you must have been the action to start or cause a chain of events that resulted in the sale. Sets into motion a series of events which results in the sale. Seller is liable to pay a commission once he or she accepts an offer from a ready, willing, and able buyer. Commission is negotiable, has to be in writing, and all disclosed. What is required to collect commission? Must be a licensed real estate broker or salesperson under a broker. 2. Must have been employed by the principal under a valid contract. That's the client. 3. Must have been the procuring cause of the sale. Must have been the action to start or cause a chain of events that resulted in the sale. A broker can only pay another broker or a salesperson licensed to him or her. A salesperson can only accept a commission from his or her own broker, the broker. Another example of primary defects are septic and wells, etc. The commission can be a percentage of the sale price. 2, a flat fee or salary. 3, a combination of the above or any other amount as set forth in the listing agreement. Established by agreement listing between the seller and the broker. Commissions are always negotiable. The fact that one party, seller, or another party, buyer, pays a commission does not create an agency relationship. An agency relationship is created by the written agreement between either the seller and the broker or the buyer and the broker. Salespeople are compensated by the broker as set forth in the mutual agreement between the broker and his or her salespeople. Next, Sherman Antitrust Act. This example was that Bill Gates is dealing with this. The Sherman Antitrust Act prohibits price fixing. That's where two brokers are getting together and deciding pricing. in a neighborhood or something. It hurts the customer and reduces competition. The Sherman Antitrust Act prohibits group boycotts of another company. Like another company is only charging 1% commission, and agents get together as a group boycott and say, we're not going to sell any of that company's listings. Sherman Antitrust Act prohibits division of markets by location or price. You cannot do this because it eliminates competition. Shopping for commission is not an option. Violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act can include prison terms, fine of $50,000 per violation. All business must be allowed to be in a free and open market. Relationships between salespersons and employing brokers. Brokers and salespeople are independent contractors and therefore are responsible for their own FICA and Social Security. Independent contractors may not receive any employee benefits. A broker can control what the independent contractor salesperson does, but not how it will be done. All independent contractors should have an independent contractor's employment contract. You must read and understand this completely, which clearly defines responsibilities and obligations. A salesperson who acts as an independent contractor controls his or her own working hours. And he added here in class cold calls. You be careful on doing cold calls. He didn't call them that, but calling clients. You could get a $10,000 fine for calling someone on a national no-call list. The broker should have a list of these people. Be careful with FISBOs. IC means independent contractor. How to control your working hours. Have to control your working hours. Which best describes the role of a fiduciary. A broker can only accept a reasonable amount of profit over the agreed upon consideration. A fiduciary relationship is established when a property manager agrees to represent an owner in leasing the owner's property. A fiduciary best described, can only disclose confidential information obtained after termination of the fiduciary relationship. A fiduciary relationship is always created when a broker shows a buyer a house. Oh, go figure this. Which best describes the role of fiduciary? A broker can only accept a reasonable amount of profit over the agreed upon consideration. The role of a fiduciary. Relationship is established when a property manager agrees to represent an owner in leasing the owner's property. A fiduciary can only disclose confidential information obtained after termination of the fiduciary relationship. Fiduciary relationship is always created when a broker shows a buyer a house. No, not unless they have an agreement. Number 2. An agent's duties to a principal include all of the following except loyalty, accounting, that's honesty in numbers, notice, legal advice. It's the wrong answer. The wrong one is legal advice, and this is an exception. An agent's duties to a principal are due care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, notice, sometimes called disclosure. Number 3, a contract in which an owner hires a broker to market the property creates an agency relationship between a contract in which an owner hires a broker to market the property, creates an agency relationship between the buyer and the seller, the buyer and the broker and the seller, the broker, buyer, and seller. A contract in which an owner hires a broker, hires a broker to market the property, creates an agency relationship between the broker and the seller. Which is fiduciary? Principal, that's the client, agent, mortgage, account, the relationship between the two is called an agency relationship, and the agent is called a fiduciary. Which is a fiduciary? The agent. On this page B2 it says the relationship between the two is called an agency relationship, and the agent is called a fiduciary. Typically, a listing broker is usually considered to be a fiduciary agent of the seller. Fiduciary relationship is one of utmost trust. An agency relationship is created in each of the following except, so you're looking for the wrong answer. A broker agrees to sell unlicensed friends' homes for no compensation. That's the wrong answer. A client authorizes a broker to sell, exchange, and manage his property for 1 year. A broker and seller sign a listing agreement for 3 months. A broker shows a tenant in an apartment. An agency relationship is created. A client authorizes a broker to sell, exchange, and manage his property. A broker and seller sign a listing agreement. A broker shows a tenant in an apartment. Broker agrees to sell an unlicensed friend's home, sell a home, for no compensation. Let's see, a broker shows a tenant in an apartment. That does not create an agency relationship. Six, acting as a dual agent without the consent of all parties is a breach of a broker's duty of loyalty, putting the principal first, confidentiality, avoidance of dual agency, unless agreed on by all parties. Acting as a dual agent without the consent of all parties is a breach of the broker's duty of loyalty, putting the principal first, confidentiality, avoidance of dual agency unless agreed by all parties. 7. Broker freehand and broker Dietrich make a deal with freehand. They have also agreed to set their rates at 7% so that the sellers will all pay the same fee. Is this acceptable? Broker Freehand and Broker Getrich make a deal that Freehand will take all the listings on the north side of town, which are located near his office, and Broker Getrich will take all the listings on the south side near his office. They have agreed not to cross into each other's territories or allow their salespeople to do this. They have also agreed to set their rates at 7%, so that the sellers will all pay the same fee. Is this acceptable? A, yes, it is good business to map our service area. B, yes, the public should be allowed to all pay the same fee. C, no, the MREC sets the commission rate. D, no, this is a violation of Sherman Antitrust Act. D, this is a violation of Sherman Antitrust. 8, Murphy does not know about the leaking basement, so he proceeds to make an offer. Should the broker have told Murphy about the defect? No. Caveat emptor would apply in this case. B, no, since the broker is the agent for the seller, he should not mention the basement unless he's asked. C, yes, any defects known to the broker should have been disclosed to Murphy. Yes, because the broker owes Murphy a fiduciary relationship. Yes, any defects known to the broker should have been disclosed to Murphy. 9. Paul Schaefer, acting as an agent of David Smith, A, can agree to change in price without Smith's approval. Paul Schaefer, acting as the agent of David Smith, must report all offers to Smith, may share his commission with the licensed attorney, can make a profit in addition to his commission. David Smith must report all offers to Smith. Puffing is best characterized as which of the following? Subjective opinions. 11. A broker listed the property for $90,000, and in 6 months no one had looked at the property. The owner called to find out why the broker told the sellers it was overpriced. To prove this point, the broker ran an ad in the paper for $10,000 less than the list price. Can broker do this? Yes, as this was a smart business practice shown by the broker. Yes, the broker can advertise the property at any price unless the seller disapproves. No, the broker can change the price at his discretion. No. Can the broker do this? No, the broker can only advertise the list price. To prove his point, the broker ran an ad in the paper for $10,000 less than the list price. Can a broker do this? A broker listed property for $90,000, and in 6 months, no one had looked at the property. The owner called to find out why the broker told the sellers it was overpriced. To prove this point, the broker ran an ad in the paper for $10,000 less than the list price. Can the broker do this? No, the broker can only advertise the list price. 12. After listing a home with a broker, the seller told the broker not to disclose a major structural defect in the house. What should the broker do? A, not tell prospective buyers because of fiduciary responsibility to the seller. B, not tell the prospective buyers because it's a responsibility of the seller. C, tell the buyer only if he asks about it. D, tell the buyer of the defect prior to writing of an offer. After listing a home with a broker, the seller told the broker not to disclose a major structural defect in the house. What should the broker do? Tell the buyer the defect prior to the writing of the offer. Seller Joe Needy lists his home for $40,000, and the broker tells its prospective buyer to submit a low offer because the seller is desperate. The buyer offers $38,000 and the seller accepts. In this situation, A, the broker was unethical, but because no one was hurt, it is not improper. B, the broker violated the agency relationship. C, the broker's action was proper in obtaining a quick offer. D, any broker is authorized to encourage bidders. The broker violated the agency relationship. Seller Joe Needy lists his home for $40,000 and the broker tells the prospective buyer to submit a low offer because the seller is desperate. The buyer offers $38,000 and the seller accepts. In this situation, the broker violated the agency relationship. 14. Salesperson Doyle was licensed under broker Carr, but sold a property that was listed by broker Falk. From whom would salesperson Doyle collect a commission? Broker Carr only. Both books are silent. Which is not an agent? A staff member or employee of a multiple listing service. A property manager working for a management corporation. A broker employed by a seller. A person working for someone else under a power of attorney. If a salesperson listed and sold the same house, how much commission is he due? Twice the commission. Twice the normal commission. Whatever his contract with the broker called for. None, since this would be dual agency. The salesperson listed and sold the same house. How much commission is he due? When the real estate agent has produced a buyer who is ready, willing, and able, the agent has accounted to the principal, is entitled to a commission, has consummated the sale, has established personal confidence. Is entitled to a commission. Listing agreement. The listing agreement is the employment contract between Listing agreement. The listing agreement is the employment contract between seller and the broker. The typical listing agreement sets forth the terms under which a broker is employed as an agent to find the buyer for the owner's real estate. It outlines the terms under which the seller will owe the broker a commission for his or her services. Commissions are paid on the sale price, not the list price. The 5 types of listing agreements. Number 1, exclusive right to sell. Number 2, exclusive agency. Number 3, open. Number 4, net listing. Number 5, agency coupled with an interest. The 5 types of listing agreements. Number 1, exclusive right to sell. Listing broker is always entitled to a fee, regardless of who procures the buyer. A, offers the most protection to the broker. B, owner of property must pay a commission to the listing broker regardless of who sells the property. A selling broker will be compensated by the listing broker. C, brokers cooperate to the MLS and agree, multi-listing service, and agree to split commissions upon bringing a ready, willing, and able buyer to the seller. The cooperating licensee should make his or her agency or non-agency relationship clear when calling for an appointment. Buyer agent, transaction broker, sub-agent of the seller, or dual agent. I want an exclusive right to sell listing as a broker, since I get paid no matter who sells the property, me, the co-op broker, or the seller herself. D, all listings in Missouri must have a definite beginning and ending date, so an automatic extender clause is not legal in Missouri. An extender clause automatically extends the listing for a set period of time or renews the listing until the parties agree to terminate their agreement. All listings must have an expiration date. No automatic extensions. All listings expire at midnight of the date of expiration unless otherwise noted. Two. Okay, that was exclusive right to sell. Number 2, exclusive agency. A, only one broker is allowed to act on behalf of the principal, the client. However, if the owner sells the property, him or herself, no commission is paid to the broker. Again, selling broker will look to the listing broker for compensation. The seller can sell the property, him or herself, and pay no commission under an exclusive agency. Frank?
Yeah.
Listen to this. Exclusive agency. Only one broker is allowed to act on behalf of the principal, who would be the client, right? However, if the owner sells the property, him or herself, no commission is paid to the broker. Again, selling broker will look to the listing broker for compensation. The seller can sell the property, him or herself, and pay no commission under an exclusive agency. Is that like a FSBO? But if you had a one-time list with a FSBO, you'd have to pay.
No, an exclusive agency is one broker.
Yeah.
One broker represents the seller.
In a one-time list?
No.
if somebody else brings in the buyer, they're not gonna get paid? Why would you do this?
All my listings that I get are exclusive.
They are?
Right.
Says the seller can sell the property him or herself and pay no commission under an exclusive agency. So that's not what you are.
I don't believe they can do that.
Only one broker is allowed to act on behalf of the principal.
Right.
However, if the owner sells the property, him or herself, no commission is paid to the broker. Again, selling broker will look to the listing broker for compensation.
Right.
The seller can sell the property him or herself and pay no commission under an exclusive agency.
I think it depends on how your listing contract reads.
Well, I think that's confusing. Okay. Number 3.
I have to go.
Open. Seller retains the right to hire any number of brokers to sell his property. Whoever provides the seller with a ready, willing, and able purchaser is entitled to a commission.
I think Seth had a lot of those down.
That's where you might have 10 brokers with 10 different sides. If the seller sells the property without the aid of a broker, he or she pays no commission. I have an open listing on 123 Mulberry Lane, but so do 10 other brokers. I have to sell a property if I am to get any of the commission. Number 4, net listing is illegal in Missouri, but not in all states. Listing, which states that seller is to receive a certain amount of money from the sale, and any amount over this will be paid to the broker as a commission. Number 5, agency coupled with an interest. An agency relationship in which the agent is given an estate or interest in the property. I, the broker, own part of the deal, or maybe I am part of the deal with others. Commission. Who gets what? Who sells the house? Owner. Exclusive right to sell. Listing broker gets commission. Who sells the house? The owner. Exclusive agency. Owner pays no commission. Open listing. Listing. Owner pays no commission. Come here, Carl. Have you already got your shoes on? Yep. Okay, we'll start this part over again. Commission. Who gets what? Who sells the house? The listing broker. Under an exclusive right to sell, the listing broker gets commission. Under exclusive agency, the listing broker gets commission. Under open listing, the broker that sells the property gets commission. Under cooperating, or who sells the house? Cooperating selling broker. Exclusive right to sell agreement would be the listing broker gets commission and pays the selling broker. Under exclusive agency, the listing broker gets commission, pays the selling broker. Under an open license agreement with cooperating selling broker, the selling broker is paid by the owner. Okay, to finish up, the 5 types of listing agreements. Okay, I did that already. Buyer agency agreement. A licensee who enters into this type of an agreement would be a fiduciary of the buyer rather than the seller. These types of agreements can be exclusive right to represent, exclusive agency, or open listing. In this case, the licensee would owe total loyalty to the buyer. Remember that payment of a commission does not determine an agency relationship. Remember, payment of a commission does not determine an agency relationship. A licensee broker can be paid by whoever agrees to pay them, regardless of their agency relationship. Termination of listing. Number 1, fulfillment of the purpose of the listing, performance, sells the property. Number 2, expiration of time as stated in the agreement. Number 3, breach or cancellation by one of the parties. Renunciation by the broker or revocation by the principal. 4, termination of listing, transfer of the title to the property as operation of law, such as bankruptcy or foreclosure. 5, termination of listing, mutual consent. 6, death or incapacitation of either party, seller or the broker dies. Termination of listing. 7, destruction of the property or change in property used by outside forces, such as change in zoning, condemnation, house burns down. Excuse me. Important. All offers must be presented until one is accepted in writing and notification of acceptance has been given. Offers must be presented regardless of salesperson or broker's opinion of them, and regardless of whether or not it contains earnest money. Note, the seller may withdraw a listing before the broker spends time and money. An owner cannot cancel a listing to sell a property himself directly to a buyer brought by the broker. The seller cannot cancel a listing once the broker has performed. Example, the broker has found a ready, willing, and able buyer. The seller may withdraw a listing before the broker spends time and money. An owner cannot cancel a listing to sell a property himself directly to a buyer brought by the broker. An owner cannot cancel a listing in order to sell a property himself directly to a buyer brought by the broker. A listing is a contract between parties. The principal client cannot cancel without being responsible for expense and time damages. Silence. The general rule is that silence does not constitute acceptance. Silence does not constitute acceptance. However, when an offeree takes benefits indicated in the offer without verbal or written acceptance, the silence may be sufficient to constitute an acceptance. It is important to remember that in order to show the parties' assent to an agreement by silence, proof must be established by the parties heard and fully understood what was said. This is especially important to remember when dealing with a person who does not understand the English language, or when dealing with a person who may be visually or hearing impaired. It should be evident that silence is not a safe way to demonstrate a meeting of the mind. Get the offers and counter-offers in writing, or run the risk of encountering problems that could otherwise be avoided. The ABC Company agreed to lease a space for 10 years. 5 years later, ABC sold its company to XYZ. If the lease is silent regarding an assignment, ABC may Assign the leasehold interest to XYZ. Not assign the leasehold interest to XYZ under any circumstances. Assign the leasehold interest to XYZ on the approval of its attorney. Not assign the leasehold interest, but they may sublease to space XYZ. I have no idea, but I'm guessing D. Settlement statement. Number 1. 4 issues of concern when you begin working on a settlement statement. This is when you're getting ready to complete the paperwork to sell a house. Four issues of concern when you begin working on a settlement statement. A. First, you are trying to establish how much money the buyer must bring to closing. The buyer is charged for what he or she must physically bring to the closing. Sale price, loan origination fees, loan assumption fees, interest to the end of the month of closing, points, assumed insurance charges, personal property brought from the seller, and other assorted expenses. B. The buyer is credited for what will be brought by others. Earnest money by the broker, loan from the lender, assumed loan, interest on assumed loan, tax proration. C. Next, you are trying to determine how much the seller will receive from the closing. Naturally, the seller will be credited for the amount he or she sold the property. Also, the seller will be credited for any personal property the buyer agreed to purchase, as well as any prorated items like insurance that the buyer might be assuming. D. The seller must pay off or have his or her loan assumed, so there must be a charge for the loan. The seller must also be charged interest for the time between the first of the month and the day of closing. Usually, taxes are paid in arrears. That means the whole year goes by and you pay at the end of the year in December for all of that year's taxes. This means that the seller lived in the property since the first of the year, but has not yet paid the taxes. Therefore, the seller must be charged for taxes while he was there. The seller would also be charged for a repayment penalty, commission, and any other fees he or she agrees to pay. If either the seller or the buyer hire an attorney, they pay a fee based on the sale price of the property. A. Items related to the sale itself. Number 1, the sale price. Always a debit to the buyer and a credit to the seller. Commission. Always a debit to the seller. Earnest money. Always a credit to the buyer. B. Financing. Number 1. Seller's loan. Loan payoff, debit seller. B. Prepayment penalty, debit seller. C. Accrued interest, debit seller. D. Buyer assumes seller's loan, debit seller, and credit buyer. E, interest on assumed loans, debit seller and credit buyer. 2, buyer's loan. A, loan amount, credit to buyer. B, accrued interest, debit buyer. C, point, debit buyer. D, loan origination, debit buyer. 3, prorated expenses. A, taxes. If they have not been paid, debit the seller and credit the buyer. B, taxes. If they have been paid, credit the seller and debit the buyer. C, assumed insurance. Credit the seller and debit the buyer. 4, assorted expenses. A, personal property bought from the seller, refrigerators, etc., credit the seller and debit the buyer. B, all other charges, debit whoever agreed to pay. He says we may get a question, as he quoted on tape 2, side B. I need to go back to that. Taxes are paid in arrears after year is over, like local personal property tax. Under settlement statement worksheet, you need to go to tape 1, side B. Tells where all the money went in a federally related deal. Note, this is not a balance sheet. It rarely will look balanced. If it is, it's by accident. Proration means how much something, I didn't get that. Chattel, a possession. It's an Old English word meaning cattle and wives. So, in other words, in our case, personal property, like a refrigerator, a range, dishwasher, and dryer. That's what it would mean these days. Taxes. If you, the seller, if you credit the buyer, or vice versa, it should be the same amount. In other words, if you credit the buyer $50 for something, you would debit the seller for $50. Should match. Taxes. First of the year. You see. Taxes. Step number 1. Determine if taxes have or have not been paid. Step 2. Figure the time for which the seller owes or receives a credit. Break it down to a daily number. Step 3. Figure the amount of money involved and multiply the number of days that are owed. In most cases, you will be debiting the seller and crediting the buyer, unless the taxes have been paid in full for the year. Insurance. Determine when is the policy paid until. Step 2. Find the closing date. Step 3. Subtract the closing date from the paid until date. Step 4. Break it down into days that the seller paid for but did not use. Step 5. Divide the total cost of the policy by 360 days for a 1-year policy. Be careful if it's a longer policy and if you are told to use 365 days. Step 6. Multiply the number of days that the seller paid for but did not use by the cost per day. Step 7. Credit the seller and debit the buyer. Number 1. The buyer assumed the seller's hazard insurance policy. It was a 2-year policy that cost $865 and was paid for in full on August 9th. The closing of the transaction took place on September 21st, 1995. How much is prorated and how should it appear on a full settlement statement? Well, we didn't do insurance. Real estate contract. A contract is defined as a voluntary agreement between legally competent parties to perform or refrain from performing some legal act. A contract may be an express agreement, which is an oral or written contract in which the parties state the contract's terms and express their intentions in words, or the buyer and can seller agree to buy and sell a house. They will sign a contract to make it enforceable. Number 2, a contract may be an implied or ostensible agreement. It is a contract in which the agreement of the parties is demonstrated by their acts and conduct. In addition, contracts may be, number 3, bilateral, in which both parties promise to do something, a promise for a promise, or unilateral. Number 4, unilateral, in which one party promises to do something if the other party acts, such as an option, contract, or listing agreement. A contract is executed when everything is checked off as completed. And contracts may be executed. Everything has been done. All promises fulfilled and is performed under the contract. Contracts may be executory. Something remains to be completed in the contract. Elements needed for a valid contract. An absence of any of these would make the contract void or voidable. Number 1, legally competent parties. Sound mind, legal age, not adjudicated incompetent. Although a minor can buy, if someone is foolish enough to sell to him or her, he or she should not sell it while a minor. Could not sell it while a minor. Only the minor could void the contract. Voidable. Sound mind, legal age. Although a minor can buy, he could not sell while a minor. Only the minor could void the contract. 2, offer and acceptance. These are elements needed for a valid contract. Number 2, offer and acceptance. Mutual acceptance. Genuine acceptance without menace, duress, or undue influence. Elements needed for a valid contract. 3, consideration. Good and valuable consideration. Sufficient for that which is bargained for. Consideration meaning a deposit or earnest money, I would assume. Number 4, legality of object. Purpose of contract is legal. A contract to commit an illegal act is void. Until the buyers and sellers have both signed the papers, it is just an offer. Until the buyers and sellers have both signed the contract, it is just an offer. Once an offer is signed, it must be communicated back to the person who made the offer, or before it becomes a contract. Must be signed and communicated back to the person who made the offer, offeree, before it becomes a contract. An offer may be withdrawn prior to being accepted at any time. I'm still under real estate contracts. Know the difference between an offer and a contract. Real estate contracts must be in writing as set forth in the statute of frauds to be enforceable. Number 1, all contracts for the sale of real property must be in writing. All contracts in writing in order to be enforceable. Number 2, all leases for more than 1 year must be in writing to be enforceable. 3, oral contracts for the sale of real property are not necessarily void, but they are unenforceable because of the statute of frauds. They're not necessarily void, but they are unenforceable. Contract terms. Time is of the essence. In a contract means in contract means that the work must be performed within a certain time frame or the party is guilty of breach of contract. Assignment, contract terms. Transfer of rights or duties to a third party and original party remains secondarily liable. Novation, substituting a new contract for an old one. Excuse me. Earnest money, cash deposit that shows buyer's intention to carry out the terms of the contract. Although customary, earnest money is not required by law. Counter offer, also called qualified acceptance. Any attempt by seller to change the terms proposed by the buyer. This may be revoked at any time prior to acceptance. Original offer is terminated upon counter offer. Mirror image. Seller agrees to an offer exactly as it was made. Liquidated damages. Amount of money agreed upon as settlement if one party doesn't live up to the terms of the contract. Contingency. Term or condition in a contract that requires a certain act to be done or a certain event to occur before the contract becomes binding. Like, they have to sell their house before they can carry through on this contract because they need the money to buy a new house. Option. An agreement to keep open for a set period an offer to sell or lease real property. An option can be used to give the buyer time to resolve questions of financing, title, zoning, etc. before committing the buyer to purchase. An option merely creates a contractual right. It does not give the optionee any estate in the property. Although the owner is obligated to sell if given notice by the buyer is not obligated to purchase. Equitable title. The interest the buyer has in property between time of acceptance of contract and closing. Parole evidence rule. Payroll evidence rule states that when parties to a real estate contract put their agreement into final written form, the payroll evidence rule prevents the admission into court of evidence of any prior or continuous oral or written negotiations or agreements that vary or contradict the terms of the written contract. No oral agreements or agreements allowed. A contract is completely performed when all terms of the contract are carried out. A contract is breached or broken when one of the parties defaults. If the seller defaults, terms rescind to cancel. Listen, Mr. Owner, the buyers really want this house. It is the only home which has the bathtub shaped like a guitar. They're big Elvis fans and will probably sue for specific performance to get this house. If the seller defaults, term rescind to cancel. 1. Buyer may cancel the contract and recover the earnest money. If the seller defaults. 2. Buyer may file a suit for specific performance to force the seller to convey the property. The basis for an equity court jurisdiction in breach of a real estate contract is the fact that land is unique and mere legal damages would not adequately compensate the buyer for the seller's breach. 3. Buyer may sue the seller for compensatory damages. Buyer cannot sue the broker for non-performance, only sue the seller. Buyer cannot sue the broker for non-performance, only sue transactions to the seller. 4. If it is discovered that a relative of a seller may have a title claim to a property, the real estate salesperson should advise the seller to contact an attorney to seek a quitclaim deed from the relative. If it is discovered that a relative of a seller may have a title claim to a property, the real estate salesperson should advise the seller to contact an attorney to seek a quitclaim deed from the relative. If the buyer defaults, number 1, the seller may declare the contract forfeited. The seller usually has the right to retain earnest money. Number 2, seller may rescind the contract and return all payments made by the buyer. 3, seller may sue for specific performance. 4, seller may sue for compensatory damages. Undue influence or duress applied to one party to a contract makes the contract voidable. Type of contract, legal effect, binding, enforceable, no legal. Examples of real estate contracts are listing agreements, property management agreements, sale contracts, buyer's agency agreements, options and leases. Statute of limitations, period of time within which certain actions must be brought to court. Straw man. One who purchases property for another so as to conceal the identity of the real purchaser, a dummy purchaser, a nominee, a front. The fact that no no two properties are identical, since there must always be a difference in location, is the basis in law for which the following court actions. No idea. In which circumstances would a buyer most likely sue for specific performance? A buyer sue. If he found out that the property was a dominant tenement. If the seller backed out of the original sales contract. If the broker misrepresented the size of the lot. If the broker misrepresented the value of the property. A buyer made an offer on a house, putting down an $8,000 earnest money deposit. An hour later, he decided he needed the $8,000 back. How can he get his money back? Withdraw the offer before the seller accepts it. Obtain a court injunction against the seller. He could not get the $8,000 back until closing. Withdraw the offer within 72 hours. A buyer made a $47,500 offer on a house. The seller received an offer and changed the price to $47,750 and initialed the price change. Upon delivering the contract back to the buyer, the original contract offer is, a buyer made a $47,500 offer on a house. The seller received the offer and changed the price to $47,750 and initialed the price change. Upon delivering the contract back to the buyer, the original contract offer is counted. Terminated. The original contract is terminated. A contract made between a minor and adult is usually exploitable by the minor. If you have real property to sell and you sign a contract with the purchaser, then the purchaser has no legal interest in the property until you deliver the deed. Purchaser, if you have real property to sell and you sign a contract with the purchaser, then the purchaser has no legal interest in the property until you deliver the deed. Interest buyer has in property between time of acceptance of contract and closing. Which the following is not a legally required element of a valid enforceable real estate contract? Legally required. Honestman is not legally required. All are examples of a first right of refusal except. Here's the exception. A developer who sold lots to builders but wants the first right to buy it back if the builder wants to sell the lot to someone else. Oh. I don't know what that means. All could terminate a listing except destruction, cancellation, mutual consent of the two parties, the owner cancels an exclusive right to sell listing agreement, attempts to sell a property to a buyer procured by the real estate company. It's too tired, I can't think. Returns to cancel. Buyer may cancel the contract until the earnest money. Buyer may file a suit for specific performance before sale of the property. Buyer may sue the seller for compensatory damages if it discovers this is relative to the seller. The buyer defaults. All could terminate a listing except I think the owner cancels an exclusive right to sell listing agreement and attempts to sell a property to a buyer pursued by the real estate company. That's what I mean. After the following are real estate contract, all the following are real estate contracts except an open listing, a management agreement, a sale contract, closing statement. Except. Oh, An option to purchase real property is not a contract, not binding on the optionor, binding on the optionee, at the time of the expiration of an option to purchase, which is true, the optioner can request his deposit back. No, the optionee can renew the option for the same time period and term. The optionee can repossess the property. The optionee forfeits his option money if he doesn't buy the property. When a property is optioned, the optionor becomes the buyer. Todd Smith made an offer to the listing broker, Gene Ross, on a seller's property. Smith put the offer in writing, but did not include any earnest money. Which of the following should broker Ross do? Refuse to present the offer since it came to no consideration. Refuse to present the offer until Smith puts the earnest money. Present the offer to the seller, but tell him it will not be legal and binding. Present the offer to the seller. Ownership. Alright. Yeah, finally to ownership. Ownership. He says to look up in the mustard book, right-of-way, easement, and property. Right-of-way and easement through the land of another. Easement. Interest in another's land as a right-of-way. Property. Owner's interest and rights in his property to the exclusion of all others. The land and anything permanently attached, such as buildings, fences, and fixtures. Ownership. Land is more than just the surface of the earth. When you own land, you own from the center of the earth outward to infinity. Real estate includes, number one, land plus appurtenances, rights, privileges, and improvements that belong to and pass with the transfer of property. Real estate includes land plus appurtenances. 2. Real estate includes man-made appurtenances, like a house, garage, swimming pool, heating, tool shed that's attached to the ground. Number 3, real estate includes natural appurtenances, trees, perennials, rose bushes would stay, grass. Number 4, air rights, gas rights, solar rights, light and sound rights. Real estate includes all of those. Real estate includes, number 5, water rights, literal, riparian, and prior appropriation. Each of the balloons to the right represents a right in real estate. These rights can be sold individually or collectively. Each right is separate and distinct. When you sell the entire bundle of rights, it is known as livery or ceasing, or covenant of ceasing. I own it. I have a right to sell it. You may say it either way, livery of ceasing, covenant of ceasing, or ceasing, I don't know. Rights in the bundle of rights. I guess you may sell, lease, which also means demise, encumber, to mortgage or take out a loan, use, enjoy, exclude, like exclude somebody, will, devise to someone else, occupy, cultivation, you may exchange, like a starter exchange, a tax avoidance, tax thing, avoiding capital gains tax. Bundle of rights, exploration, license, like using your paid ticket seat at a Cardinal game to have permission to the stadium or to that seat for that paid period of time. Dedicate, give away, share, mortgage, trade, abandon. Rights in the bundle of rights. The total collection of rights which may be claimed by the private ownership is best described as the bundle of rights. All property improvements usually go with the property. Ownership. There are 5 economic characteristics of land. It's called DUT. D for demand. 2, utility or utility or usefulness. 3, scarcity of the land. 4, transferability of the land, C. And S, situs. D, demand. Is there a big demand for the property in this area? U, utility or usefulness. 3-bedroom houses sell better than 1-bedroom houses. S, scarcity. Areas where few properties are put on the market demand higher prices when they are sold. Transferability. Are funds available to the person who wants to buy? Are interest rates up or down? How easy is it to get a loan? Has there been a new shopping mall or built in the area? Situs. Area preference. people's preferences for a given area. This is the most important economic characteristic of land. Cited. Most important economic characteristic of land. It's important to keep the 5 economic characteristics of land separate from the 3 physical characteristics of land. Physical characteristics are immobility, 2, indestructible, like Times Beach or Herculaneum, non-homogeneous, non-homogeneous, homogeneous, uniqueness, only one of a kind. So economic characteristics of land: demand, utility, scarcity, transferability, and situs. In other words, economic characteristics of the land. Lacking one of these items diminishes the market value of the property, the price a buyer will be willing to pay. There are 3 physical characteristics: immobility, indestructibility, non-homogeneous. Because no 2 properties are the same, a buyer can sue a seller, or a seller can sue a buyer for specific performance if one refuses to close. What is the opposite of real property? Personal property. What is personal property? Personal property is anything that is not real property. Personal property or chattel do not include the house, they don't come with the house. The mortgagors prefer to have a separate chattel mortgage when dealing with personal property. It is readily movable. Personal property is sometimes referred to as chattel. Tanks or any kind on a property must be removed or cleaned up. In contract, all personal property to be removed by seller at his expense. If something is built in or looks built in, it could be negotiable. So don't go ripping out a bunch of stereo equipment if it looks like it's built in. If you want this stuff, you need to take it out before the house is shown and put on the market. Ownership. Something like a plasma TV might look built in, or like it should stay, and you try to leave it. Ownership. Changes between types of property. Sometimes real property becomes personal property, or personal property becomes real property. Fixtures is defined as something which once was personal, but it has been installed and becomes real property. Blank is when personal property becomes real property. I don't know what that is. Since a fixture is considered real estate, it would remain with the house when it was sold. It is also called an appurtenance, since it has been added to the property. Annexation is how it's attached. Test for determining if it is a fixture made. Method of annexation: adaptability, intent of the parties, damage. Will it cause damage to remove it? Intent of the parties: custom-made living room, shapes, air conditioning units, built into walls, TV sets built into a wall, built-in microwave ovens, etc. Intent of the parties. So, test for determining if it is a fixture. An acronym: MADE. M for method of annexation, or how do they add it. A for adaptability. I for intent of the parties, where they intend it to be, a built-in TV, whatever. D for damage. Will it cause a lot of damage to remove something? The value of an item would not have anything to do with determining if it is a fixture. Like a burglar alarm. You need to tell people if it's owned or leased. Cable satellite dish. Is it owned or leased? What to do. Annual crops, such as wheat, corn, vegetables, are known as annual crops, or fructose. Industrialists and are considered personal property. But as long as the annual crop is growing, it will be transferred as part of the real estate, unless special provision is included in the sale contract. All crops are known as an emblement. Perennial trees, perennial bushes, and grasses that do not require annual cultivation are known as fructus naturalis and are considered real property. If a tree is cut down and sold as firewood, the firewood becomes personal property. Annexation changes how item is attached. Personal property to real property to personal property. Annexation changes would be personal property to real property. Severance changes would be real property to personal property. Garage door openers, house keys are not personal property. They're not attached, but they actually are fixtures. An exclusion in an argument, negotiable item. If you want to keep it, like a dining room chandelier, get it out of there before the contract says, before you get a contract or show the property. Commercial tenants. Commercial trade fixtures is personal property and is defined as the property of the tenant that is installed and is necessary for their trade or business, like the bowls in a beauty salon, the extra bowls and those fixtures, etc. Gas pumps at a gas station. A trade fixture is personal property and can be moved by the tenant at the end of the lease term, like pizza ovens and things like that. But of course it would have to be written and done in a timely manner, etc. If not removed before the expiration of the lease, the trade fixture becomes the property of the landlord at the end of the lease term. Remember, trade fixtures are commercial and considered to be personal property. Fixtures are considered to be real property. Which of the following statements best describes the effect on mineral rights when the land is sold? Mineral rights always pass with the sale of the land. Mineral rights cannot be sold separately from the land. Mineral rights pass to the buyer unless specifically excluded. Mineral rights belong to the federal government. A commercial tenant installed some ice cream coolers to sell ice cream. Which of the following statements best describes what happens to the case upon the expiration of the lease? The tenant would be able to take the cases only if the tenant paid the owner for the fair market value of the cases. B, the tenant would be able to take the cases as they were installed by the tenant. C, the landlord would be able to keep the cases as once the cases were installed they became real property. The owner would be able to keep the cases as they would be considered emblems. Commercial tenant, which the following statements best describes what happens to the cases upon the expiration of the lease? The tenant would be able to take the cases. The tenant would be able to take the cases as they were installed by the tenant. The landlord would be able to keep the cases as once the cases were installed they became real property. The owner would be able to keep the cases as they would be considered emblems. The tenant would be able to take the cases as they were installed by the tenant. B. And what is an emblem? That's cross. Okay. Which of the following is usually not considered to be real property? Not considered real property. A chandelier, an awning, a portable gas stove, a furnace. Portable gas stove. Which is not an economic characteristic of land? Economic characteristic of land. Which is not. Transferability, demand for the area, immobility, utility of the land. Which is not. demand is one of them. Utility is one of them. Scarcity is one of them. Transferability is one of them. And situs. Immobility is not an economic characteristic of land. Which best describes a fixture? It is considered to be personal property. No. It is no longer considered to be real property. It was at one time personal property. It is usually removed upon the sale of the property. No. It was at one time personal property. It is no longer considered to be real property. It is considered to be personal property. A fixture is considered real estate. It would remain with the house when it was sold. It is also called an appurtenance since it has been added to the property. It is considered to be personal property. Is no longer contributed. It was at one time personal property, which would not be considered real property. The house, the mineral rights, air rights, trade fixture. What is that? A trade fixture. Not considered real property. Which of the following are considered to be real property? Shelves installed by a tenant, annual crops, appurtenances, house plants, which would not. No. Which of the following are considered to be real property? The following? Personal property is anything that is not real property. Personal property is sometimes referred to which of the following are considered to be real property? An artist had a stained glass window in a hallway. Upon selling the property, the artist wanted to take the window. Can she do this? Yes. It is an art object and can be taken. Yes, as long as she made it clear before she signed the contract and it was agreed upon by the buyer. No, it is part of the real estate and cannot be taken under any circumstances. No, as one cannot contract to remove real estate. Real property can be converted into personal property through severance. Estate in land. Oh my gosh, it's too much. Well, I don't know how I'm ever get this done. Okay, Estate in land. An estate in land is the degree of ownership one holds in the land. See a tell, wrong answer, page 3. Okay, I don't know what that is. An estate in land is the degree of ownership one holds in the land. Historical background. Feudal system. Under the feudal system of land ownership, all land was owned by the king or the government. The individuals were merely tenants who had the right to occupy and use the land. Alloidial system. Around the 17th century, the alloidial system of ownership came into being. Under the alloidial system, individuals are entitled to own property without proprietary control of the king or government. The alloidial system and the right for individuals to own property is one of the foundations upon which our country was built. However, the government does retain some rights in your property. All property in the United States is under the alloidial system. Every piece of property has to be owned. Government interference in private ownership in the United States. PETE. P-E-T-E. Look up and know, police cars. The right of the government to enact laws and enforce them. Zoning laws regulate. Mustard book. Zoning, the regulation over the use of land within a specific municipality. Zoning. Protection of property rights. Zoning limits the rights of property owners, specifying allowable and prohibited uses. Zoning restrictions can be traced to early colonial days when the residential areas were separated from industries with saloons, blacksmith shops, stables, and tanneries placed on the opposite side of the village. The fundamental reasons to have zoning laws are apparent: to protect the interests of the property owner and to achieve an aesthetically pleasing environment in the community. Limiting uses within a zone provides that protection. Imagine how difficult it would be to retain value in your home if an automobile dealership or a saloon could operate next door. Zones place each type of residence, business, and industry in compatible areas. Today, a zoning board or planning commission is appointed to pass and regulate restrictions on land use. A city development plan reviews the physical development patterns and establishes policies to direct and finance the growth and improvement of the urban environment. It is not unusual for a city to have a strategic plan in place that establishes the general goals for land use, including economic development, parks and recreation, and transportation. In exercising its police power, the planning board of the local government establishes the zoning ordinances that regulate and control land use. Zoning falls into 4 categories, general categories: residential, commercial, industrial, and agricultural. Since it is wise to have homogeneous or homogeneous divisions, each of these 4 categories is further divided into more specific areas. A typical key to zoning follows, but keep in mind this varies from city to city. 1. Residential is represented by R1 through R7. R1 may be the most restrictive, requiring larger lots. Within these classifications, the regulations are set as to minimum requirements for the square footage of the lot, minimum lot width, and minimum front, side, and rear setbacks from the perimeter of the property boundaries. Maximum building height and coverage of the lot or other stipulations found in these categories. O1 is for office use. C1 might permit a neighborhood business, with C2 used for community business. C3 for general business, and C4 for central business. Again, the size and use will be dictated by the zoning in each of the business categories. I1 may be used for light industrial, I2 for heavy industrial, and IM for manufacturing use. 5. A represents agricultural. In each of these areas, the zoning laws of the municipality govern the type of structure one can erect and the uses to which the property can be adapted. The residential areas are usually buffered from busy streets by multifamily units with office space following and commercial uses abutting the main street. The strip of land that separates the areas is referred to as a buffer zone. Most cities need the land use to be regulated within a 1 to 3 mile radius of the city. This right to control is acquired by legislative enactment. As the company spreads, it merges into the rural agricultural areas, and the need for converting the farmland into other uses arises. City dwellers desiring to move into the country may force the conversion of agricultural land into 5 and 10 acre plots. The right of the government to enact laws and enforce them, zoning laws, building codes, environmental protection laws. C for police power. E, the right of the government PETE, an acronym, I guess. The P is for police power, the right of government to enact laws and enforce them, like zoning laws, building codes, environmental protection laws. E stands for eminent domain, the right of the government to take property for the public good. Condemnation is the process by which property is acquired to eminent domain. But anything other than going through the 3 steps prescribed here would not be in eminent domain. It would be called a taking. Taxation is the key. Taxation, the right the government has to collect funds to pay for public services. There are 2 types of taxation: special assessment and ad valorem, or general real estate taxes. These taxes will take priority in the sale of a home and need not be recorded to be valid. E, a property cannot be without an owner. Therefore, when an owner dies without a will and without heirs, then the property reverts back to the state. Similarly, the property is abandoned through lack of paying taxes. The ownership of the product goes to the state. I guess this is the state, but I'm not sure. Estate equals status. 1, to what extent do you own or lease your property? 2, to what degree do you own it? 3, what is the nature of your ownership? Which is true when a property is taken by eminent domain? It must be for the public use. The owner must be compensated. No other property is used for the same purpose. Only the state can take property under eminent domain. Which is true when a property is taken under eminent domain? The property owner must be paid compensation. The property must be for the public use or good. The owner must have due process. I'm going to go with D. It's the most right answer. With considering the distractors here, the owner must be compensated. The system of ownership of real property in the United States is allodial. The right of the government body to take ownership of real estate for public good. The right of the government body to take ownership of real estate for public good is called eminent domain. Who can acquire property through eminent domain? Landlord, leases, certain government entities. Johnson City took a slum area by eminent domain and then sold it to a private developer who built luxury condominiums on the property. Is Johnson City legally justified in doing this? No, because land taken by eminent domain should be for the public good. No, because land taken by eminent domain cannot be sold to a private developer. Yes, because land can be taken by eminent domain for urban renewal if it is for the good of the public. D, yes, because land taken for urban renewal is acquired by the state through easement. Took a slum area by eminent domain and then sold it to a private developer who built luxury condominiums. No, because land taken by public good. Cannot be sold to a private developer. Yes, because land can be taken by us for urban renewal if it is for the good of the public. A homeowner owned a house on a lot. The front 10 feet of the lot were taken by eminent domain for a sidewalk. Would the homeowner be entitled to compensation? Yes, because the land was taken for public good by eminent domain. Yes, because he must pay for the use of the sidewalk. No, because he still had the use of the house and the lot. No, because compensation is not given on land taken for public use. I have no idea. What would be an example of police power? Directing traffic at a football game, speed limits, zoning laws being stricter, making sure the title is good. What would be an example of police power? Zoning, building codes, environmental protection. The term real estate includes all except, I'm looking for the wrong one, anything affixed to land with the intent of being permanent. The rights to the area of the land, rights to subsurface minerals, fructus industrial. Fructus industrialists and are considered personal property. But as long as the annual crop is growing, it will be transferred as part of the real estate unless a special provision is included in the sale contract. A woman had a cougar as a pet at her house, at her home outside the city. When the area became incorporated into the city, she had to get rid of the cougar. By what government power could the city make her do this? Eminent domain? No. Police power. Condemnation is the process by which the building inspector determines the building is unfit. A lender recovers property after default. Limited domain is enforced. Churches buy property. Condemnation is the process by which property is acquired to eminent domain. Condemnation is the process which eminent domain is enforced. Which is a process used by the government for taking private land into public good. The process used by the government for taking private land into public good. Eminent domain. Government. Condemnation is the process by which property is acquired. Ownership. What are the private rights, also called interest or estate, in real estate? Freehold estate. I own the property. What we think of as ownership. There is no defining end date, and the estate lasts at least a lifetime. Types of leasehold. Estates for years, estates for period, estate at will, estate at suffering. Types of freehold. Fee simple, fee disputable, like estate. Freehold owns, leasehold rents. A landlord owns the property in freehold but rents it to the tenant in leasehold. 2. Leasehold estate. I rent the property. What we think of as renting or leasing. There is usually a definite ending date. Sometimes these are referred to as less than freehold estate. Freehold. Free, simple. Fee simple. Fee simple, absolute. Owns the bundle of rights. Freehold is the highest degree of ownership, indefinite duration and limited, is inheritable and freely transferable. Freehold is subject to only the government powers of PET. I have owned this property forever. Only Uncle Sam can interfere with my ownership, and my children can inherit the property, so it will go on forever. 2. Fee simple under freehold. Fee simple defeasible. Based on an occurrence or non-occurrence of a specified event. Fee simple conditional. An estate that dictates on the condition that. An estate that provides the right to resent re-entry. Example, I will sell my property to you with the condition that alcohol is never served in the premises. It's no home.